We begin in the United States, where there are reports that federal prosecutors have been asking witnesses directly about Donald Trump's alleged involvement in efforts to overturn the results of the last presidential election. A growing number of people linked to the former president have reportedly been asked to testify. The Department of Justice has yet to formally open a criminal investigation. Rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol in January last year in an effort to overturn the president's election defeat. Mr. Trump denies he incited the riot. No former U.S. president has ever been indicted for criminal conduct. Meanwhile, the former president has delivered his first speech in Washington since leaving office, repeating false claims the election was stolen. He described the United States under President Biden as a nation in decline and a cesspool of crime. He also strongly hinted he would run again for the presidency in 2024.
I always say I ran the first time and I won. Then I ran a second time and I did much better. We got millions and millions more votes. And you know what? That's going to be a story for a long time. What a disgrace it was. But we may just have to do it again. We have to straighten out our country. We have to straighten out our country. We had it there. We had it. Our country is now a cesspool of crime. We have blood, death, and suffering on a scale once unthinkable because of the Democrat Party's effort to destroy and dismantle law enforcement all throughout America. It has to stop, and it has to stop now.
Mr. Trump. Well, Donald Trump's former Vice President Mike Pence also spoke in Washington. He may well turn out to be a rival for the 2024 Republican nomination. He appeared to separate himself from his former boss, describing an agenda for the future and calling on the party not to look backwards.
People may choose to focus on the past, but elections are about the future. And I believe conservatives must focus on the future to win back America. We can't afford to take our eyes off the road in front of us, because what's at stake is the very survival of our way of life. So I don't know that our movement is that divided. I don't know that the president and I differ on issues. But we may differ on focus. I truly do believe that elections are about the future, and that it's absolutely essential at a time when so many Americans are hurting, so many families are struggling, that we don't give way to the temptation to look back.
Former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence. Well, for more on all that, we can cross to Washington and join Arise U.S. correspondent Eric Ham. Good to see you, Eric. Let's start with those reports in America that federal prosecutors have been asking witnesses directly about Donald Trump's alleged involvement in efforts to overturn the results of the last presidential elections. What are we learning about the investigation?
Yeah, that's right, Charles. In fact, we know that the Washington Post actually broke this story about 24 hours ago, that there was now an investigation underway that was involving the president. And this investigation is now being led by the Department of Justice. And we at Rise News, we were able to independently verify this as well. And so now we know that several key individuals for the Pence camp as well as for Donald Trump have been brought in to provide information and testimony to the grand jury. And so not only do we know that there is an investigation underway and it does involve the former president of the United States, but we know that they have already impaneled a grand jury, which means that there has been, quite frankly, enough information to move forward to actually begin the process of subpoenaing people as well as bringing them in to testify. Now, this does not mean that Donald Trump is necessarily the target of the investigation. It does not mean that this could lead to an indictment of the former president. But what we do know is that there is an investigation underway. In fact, the Attorney General himself, Merrick Garland, has said that they will follow the facts wherever they may go, and that we know now that this is an investigation that has been underway at least since April, when we know at the time key individuals, including the former chief of staff to the former president, Mark Meadows, as well as John Eastman, the individual who actually cooked up this idea that the vice president could actually decertify the election. He also his home was raided, and we know that his cell phone and other key documents and devices were actually taken by the FBI. And so we know that this is a process that is playing out right now in the United States. And of course, this will be the first time since Richard Nixon that this type of investigation by the Justice Department into a former president has actually taken place.
So, Eric, if there is the potential that Donald Trump could be charged with a crime, how big a development would that be in American politics?
Well, Charles, we know that the former president has already been impeached twice. We do know that the Mueller investigation clearly outlined that there were there were things that the former president, even while in office, could have been charged for. The only reason he was not is because that there was a DOJ, a Department of Justice memo outlining that they would not prosecute a sitting U.S. president. Well, now that he is no longer in office, we do know that this is a process that is underway. And Charles, our sources are telling us that the former president is perhaps moving up his announcement that he will run for president in a way to try to stave off some level of criminal prosecution. So that gives us an indication that the former president is very concerned about this, but also this is not his only legal morass that is confronting him right now. As we know, Fani Willis, the district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, has also impaneled a grand jury, and we know, just like the DOJ investigation that is looking at the fake elector scheme that was being implemented, we also know that the district attorney in Georgia is also doing the same thing. And we're told from our sources in Georgia that she is building out a very broad conspiracy theory in her case there. So we're seeing now that the former president is looking at perhaps a two-front battle to keep himself out of a legal jeopardy, and he believes the way to do that is to run for president.
And briefly, Eric, on the timing, do you think the Justice Department, although they're not supposed to be influenced by political considerations, would want to wrap all this up before the midterm elections? Because clearly an investigation into Donald Trump could be used as a political weapon.
Yeah, well, that is a concern, which is why just recently we saw a memo that was released to the press by the Attorney General Merrick Garland, stating that as the election gets closer, there will be no public announcements about any investigation or efforts to try to charge or indict any individual. So it's unlikely that we will see charges or indictments between now and the midterm elections. But after the midterm elections, certainly all bets are off.
Meanwhile, of course, Eric, Donald Trump has given his first speech in Washington since leaving office, repeating those false claims that the last election was stolen. Briefly, tell us more.
Yeah, that's right. His first time back in Washington since leaving office, and we saw dueling messages from the former president and his vice president, Mike Pence. They both spoke to conservative audiences yesterday, and of course, President Trump continued to double down on this idea that the election was stolen, and that when back in office, that he would focus on a much more robust effort to try to combat crime. So clearly he's making himself at least a candidate in theory, and now the question is when he will formally announce.
And I wonder if all this is touching people in America. I mean, I know it's early days yet because this news of the investigation is just coming through, but Mr. Trump's return to Washington, his apparent announcements that he's going to run again in 2024, the fact that an investigation is taking place, what's the general reaction to all of that?
While the president does remain very popular with his base, and right now he is seen as the front runner if in fact he decides to pursue the Republican nomination, there is some Trump fatigue that's beginning to set in. In fact, right now polling shows that Republicans believe that the former president, his actions leading up to and including January 6th were either unethical or illegal. And also the president's support for running for the Republican nomination in 2024 has actually fallen from 50% to 44%. Not a lot, but still what it shows, at least among the base, there are those who don't want to see Donald Trump run again and are ready to turn the page.
Eric, thanks very much indeed. Eric Ham, Arise US correspondent, talking to me there from Washington.